Welcome back. Bringing us back a little early because the game has started. In the bottom left, as the red Protoss, he is the MCan man. It's MCanning. In the top right is the blue Zerg. We have Liquid TLO, who is, yes, he is German. But he is also now an official Canadian. So, he plays for all the NA leagues. This is actually his correct server. Alongside Namshar, as I believe it is more about residency than it is about actual citizenship. I think TLO actually might have taken the citizenship test, but don't quote me on that. Or, well, actually just, I mean, he married a Canadian, so I think that does it too. But I don't think Namshar has, and Namshar has been living in Canada, so he's on the other side of the bracket, which is why I bring him up. But, of course, for now, we're talking about good old North America rivalry. America versus Canada. Slash little German. A little bit. MCanning. He's beloved by all. You don't know about him. Don't know where you've been. Actually a really cool guy and a really fun player. Also very good. Consistently in Grandmaster, and not like he's gonna fall out anytime soon. I mean, he does, he's a streamer more than he's a pro gamer, but he's definitely a decent player. Who has a unique style, can take it to some of these guys who do identify a lot more as a player. But, I mean, against TLO, who has been a player for 10 years, and who, I mean, maybe you could say is, like, not been at his top for a while now, still is very, very good. This is going to be a tough matchup for MCanning. I just know that you guys really love watching these two. Both fan favorites, truly. Both great people. Thank you, 47 is 43 months. Oh my god, you're so close to being on 47, dude. What are we gonna do when you're on 47 months? I'll get the cats for you. That's what I'll do on 47 months. Alright, what do we got? A little adept scouting, not even really harassment. TLO not caring about his gas placement, really. You can put it on the other side so it's a little more hidden. In this case, he is still mining, which is a little bit concerning for MCanning, but it could just be for Overlord's speed, or... I think he just recently put them back on mining is also what happened. MCanning was pretty consistent about the Adept Shade, so he would know, even if I wasn't quite paying attention. That is a full wall. We have Resident Glaives on the way with the Robo about to finish, so we do have a good old Resident Glaives attack, the build that has been troubling Zergs left, right, and center all around the ladder. Quite annoying, actually. The strength of this build, I mean, really, it can be totally shut down, but you rarely see it be totally shut down. Usually it's shut down because someone messes up their Warpers and Micro and loses the Adepts. But the power of the build is that it doesn't really... I was gonna say, don't do that. It doesn't really stop. You know, it does the attack, and the Zerg player goes, ha ha ha, I was totally prepared, and then it comes again later, and you're like, well, gosh darn it, I was prepared, but my roaches were in the right position, so this is stupid, and it's frustrating to play against. And on top of that, with what MCanning is doing, but also going up to the Dark Shrine, you also have to worry about being in the wrong place for half a millisecond, and then having your Spore Crawler killed. It's just overall a frustrating thing to deal with. TLO actually has, it looks like, his own way of dealing with this build. He's figured it out. He saw the Twilight Council and the Robo. Yeah, he didn't see the Dark Shrine, though. So his response is not actually going to Roaches, which is quite dangerous, I should say. I will say. Banelings can absolutely respond against the Adepts, and that's what's happening here. But there's a reason this isn't really the go-to. Now, that was a particularly good showcasing of how Banelings can be fine against Adepts or Charge Lots. But don't be so confident, I guess, if you try to do the same defense. If the Adepts split well, if they don't die to the first Banelings, but rather suddenly it's 5, 10, then 15 Adepts, or 4, 8, and then 12 Adepts, there you go. Then it kind of gets out of control. You use your Banelings, and before you can reinforce with more Banelings, suddenly the Adepts are killing your Lings. And it kind of snowballs from there. That does happen. And it's one of the reasons why Baneling defenses for early game stuff has kind of fallen out. Also, early game stuff can sometimes be deceiving, and If you're building a bunch of Banelings against Immortal Sentry all-ins, well, you're gonna have a tough time too. But in this case, that was beautiful. That was actually the exact type of shutdown that doesn't usually happen, including the DT follow-up. It can turn into an Archon drop is the good news, but there's already a lot of potential here for TLO. Word count is similar, but TLO is about to get a cancel on this Nexus. A single DT is here. No, 2 DTs. Take that back. So it looks like TLO doesn't want to waste the Ling numbers on getting that Nexus kill, but I think he could. Now it's 3 DTs, so Banelings do hit things even if they don't see them. Overseer is, Lair is finishing, so an Overseer will eventually be on the way, but the Nexus is going to go down. Despite MCanning's attempts to stop it, double Archons on this side of the map are trying to do some damage. A couple Warpins also happening as well, but those are not charge lots. They're just trying to help against the Queens. A couple Spine Crawlers were also produced to help out against the Adepts, with the Banelings didn't do such a great job. And TLO is even tracking that Warp Prism with the Spore Crawler here. The Queen number is pretty high as well, as awfully scary, as TLO is definitely making sure to click on that Warp Prism, not the Archons. And it is going to finally force that back. But TLO might have taken a bit of a hit to his seamless production. He got interrupted for sure. He didn't actually take a hit to his actual drone count. He's now up to 6 bases. So he doesn't even need to inject, is what I'm getting from this. And could actually make more drones very, very easily. This is definitely still not the most consistent way to deal with the units that TLO's up against. DTs, Adepts, and Archons. But with his position in this game, then it's working out quite fine. It does get it's a bit of a slippery slope, though. I mean, TLO, if he feels confident because, you know, I'm styling on this kid for now, when there's suddenly 7 Archons, he's going to feel really... He's going to regret not going up to also Hydras, usually is what it is, or at least Ravagers from a Roach Warren. Ling Baneling can only do so much, even against Terran, while it can be a thing. You start talking about the weaknesses of it, you know, up against drops and bigger armies, the more maxed out armies, and we're not anywhere close to maxed out armies yet. It's just something that's a little concerning. MCanning, having calmed down a little bit from his earlier harassment, has built up a decent number of Archons and is looking to attack. And TLO, he might have a 20 army supply lead. His Banelings crashing into the Archons will quickly deplete that supply. There are no sentries, however, to help the Stalkers, so the Banelings actually do end up crashing into the Archons. Instead of maybe the juicier Stalkers, as they blink back, they are still surrounded by Lings with +1 and no upgrades for MCanning just before MCanning's +1 was done. And while the Archons did a fantastic job soaking up all the Banelings, they did die, leaving the Stalkers very vulnerable to a surround from the Lings. So not just enough units there. I mean, it looked really tempting to push into someone who is on that type of technology, but there just weren't enough units for MCanning. Good news is he has his 3rd base saturated, and maybe he could even reach towards a 4th base, but he needs to up the Archon count again, and that's looking a bit difficult to do since he's also producing Stalkers, which take a lot more gas than just replacing charge lots, of which he doesn't have charge lots, by the way. He's just sold as regular Zealots. I think those are DTs. If I had to guess by their death sound, they evaporated into thin air. So no harassment. Roach Warren Infestation Pit is now on the way. They're now on the way here, and that might be for a hive and adrenal glands, because apparently is how TLO is playing today, but it also could be for swarm hosts.
Thank you for becoming a member.
Thank you very much, Tater Tutor. Just slightly worse than a Tater Totter. Thank you for that tier 1 sub. Another drop in the main with a Warp Prism, but Lings are fast little devils. They'll respond very, very quickly, and that won't get much done. Even a Spine Crawler still there from the earlier days, and TLO just needs to go ahead and get a decent supply with the army type he has, and he could probably win this game. But it's always a struggle to completely max out on Ling Baneling. I've tried maxing out on Lings in mono battles, and I tell you, it takes a lot. It takes like 7 hatcheries with consistent injects. On just 3 base saturation, not even like 4 or 5 base saturation. But Banelings are a little more expensive. It's a little bit easier. It's still slowly maxing out, very slowly. MCanning needs to spend his money as well, but it's just the imbalance of gas and minerals maybe that's throwing him off here. He's also having to rebuild a couple of gateways. He really wants to get that Nexus, that he had to cancel it, and now he's going to have to deal with mass drops into the main base. TLO going back to the days of him being a Terran player back in 2010 by doing a Doom drop into the main. MCanning has his own tiny little drop looking for some equal damage, and, well, I can only imagine that it won't be equal. That +2 doesn't look like it's long for this world, as it is only 60% done. It's going to go down here. The probe's desperately being pulled in to help out. The gateway's also going to go down. Storm might just finish here, but MCanning is going to tap out anyways. GG. Not getting too much done with that. It is a best of 5, so there's a lot of builds that MCanning could throw out to try and help here, but TLO is just the better player. Might be brutal, but it is the simplest way to put it. TLO needs a minute. Someone makes a Reddit post that Zerg is the least popular race and is declining. Where were all the posts when Protoss was the least played race? I mean, it's unlikely we'll ever have 33% for every single race, right? Plus random, actually. Swan is my dog Tater Tot's nickname. It's an amazing name for a dog, and nickname for a dog. We now spawn an Eternal Empire in the top right as the red Protoss. He is MCanning. In the bottom left, as the blue Zerg, he is Liquid TLO. TLO was going a little bit for the creativity points, just not very reliable to do what he did. But if you're in the lead and you know what you're doing, you got the mechanics behind it too, then you can do that. MCanning was going to try and abuse one of the more obnoxious builds that Protoss has developed, but it does require still a fair bit of flair. And I don't know if MCanning has the solid mechanics behind the fancy flair that Adepts can bring to actually make that work. That's usually what makes it, the scariest, is that you deal with the first Adepts okay, the second Adepts get 10 drones, the third Adepts get 5 drones, you're starting to clean it up, but you finally move across the map with your Roach Ling Force, and then suddenly they have 2 Immortals and a third Nexus with a shield battery, and you're like, damn it. If only they macroed worse. Well, MCanning got completely bopped with the first one, unfortunately. Tried to follow up with a DT that also didn't do very much, and then his macro got interrupted. I don't know if it was really that bad, but it just got interrupted because TLO could easily go across the map right after the first Adepts warp in. So that's not what you want. You want the Adepts to always be buying time and always threatening. So just kind of a failure of pacing there. And I think I'll do something else, something different. MCanning is certainly most well known for his disruptor usage, but I would say that I give his disruptor play the most possibility of working against, like, Terrans. Against very standard Terrans who don't like to play against things that are weird. That's when I think MCanning's style can disregard a good 1000 MMR. Maybe even more, because players will just be like, what the heck? This is stupid. Or this is frustrating. It's more so what it is. It's frustrating. Because he knows the pairware with DTs. And PvP also is something that I think he can actually really take games off of really all-star players. Because, again, disruptors can be brutal. Even more brutal, actually, because Protoss is, you know, the less units but more expensive units race. But PvZ, it's kind of where the disruptor play would be the weakest. There's just a mass amount of cheap units, so even if you get a fantastic disruptor shot on 6 Ravagers, there are still 20 Roaches and 50 Lings, which you'll need another 3 or 4 more shots to really deplete. So if MCanning doesn't do it, I'm not surprised. If he doesn't do it that often in general, I'm not surprised. It's a fun thing to do, and it's the best memes, the best games he has to show sometimes. I mean, he used to get a lot of MCanning replays for his PvP because he would be in really terrible positions and then come back thanks to his disruptors, but hardly ever PvZ. Usually just dies if he's really up against a macro monster. But I know he can play some decent PvZ otherwise. You have a Stargate opener, very standard stuff here on this map. It's just that TLO has been very good for a very long time. Even as he's moved over to Canada, gotten a new lifestyle, he seems to be able to keep his play actually a pretty solid level. Doesn't deteriorate too much. I'd say that's because he's always been more of a... what's the word? He's always had a scheduled, organized way of looking at StarCraft 2 practice, as opposed to just being like, I'm going to grind 12 hours and hope that works. It's kind of like one of those contradictions where grinding for 12 hours is actually kind of the laziest thing you can do. If you're grinding for 12 hours, it's literally just game. Instead of taking the time to sit down and analyze and look to others and get feedback and perfect certain points and blah, 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 blah. So I'd like to say that's why TLO's skill hasn't really deteriorated, but I'm sure he would actually have a lot more to say on as to that. And he does still get occasionally, surprisingly, beaten by some of these North American players. To him, it's because they play so weird. And MCanning is just not playing weird, not right now. Another Stargate into Robo. Saw a lot of these from Disc. And then Twilight Council and a Forge should be coming down. Both of them should have been coming down. You don't actually play that much into a PvZ late game, or mid game, I should say, without a Twilight Council. There we go. That's actually really odd. Almost all these 3-base builds are about putting down both those structures at the exact same time. And the Robo is the one that's a little mistimed. Might just be a mistake. Looking into a mistake. No reason to do that. Adepts, unfortunately, are caught in the middle of the map before they can get anything really juicy. Like, if all 4 of them were here, that hatchery is going to be bothered for quite some time. Unfortunately, they weren't. Oracles are recalled as MCanning realizes his 3rd Nexus could be under threat. He does not have a lot of units after sacrificing the 4 Adepts like he did. And he doesn't have a lot of production power. He had 3 sentries, but yeah, better to put them safe and tucked away in our natural than try and protect the 3rd Nexus. The Oracles do have plenty of energy to do that, so I think MCanning is fine. It could have been a lot worse if his sentries were on the 3rd base, for sure. Or his Oracles had died or just didn't have energy. So TLO's going to have 4 bases and working up to 66 drones. Lair is going to finalize here. Observer not quite caught by that Spore Crawler. We'll get the full scouting information in that main base. Nothing to worry about so far. No Spire potential until that layer is done after all, but you want to get an idea if they're going Banelings and Roaches or Hydras, or eventually, of course, they could go into a Spire. For TLO, it's going to be a Hydraless Den and an Infestation Pit both at the same time, while starting up his Baneling speed. And just pure macro. The winner does qualify into the main event. But it's best of 5, so we still got a little ways to go. Good force fields there. Got a decent amount of links for sure. PG favoring Sue strongly. Favoring TLO strongly. Well, I think if you wanted to boil it down to numbers, I think they might actually have an 1,000 MMR difference. I'm not sure about that, but I wouldn't be surprised. MCanning's Grandmaster on NA, which starts at 5,300, so if he's up at even if he's at 5,800, it's not going to be 1,000 difference, but 500 MMR difference at least is what I'm going to guess. I don't actually know. And 500 MMR is pretty considerable. Starcraft definitely isn't pairing you up against people who are 500 MMR lower or higher than you. 300 sometimes, when it really wants to be a jerk. 500, not so much. I should be cheering for MCanning as an American. And I am cheering. I'm cheering for good games. I'm cheering for explosive games. It's just, I don't know, a little disingenuous to be like MCanning could win this series. I think he can win games, but to win the series, I think would require TLO also being a little too overconfident. Like, maybe last game. If he had, if MCanning had 3 more Archons and 5 more Stalkers, that push actually would have been one of those, like, oh, okay, maybe he can reinforce. Oh, he's reinforcing with pure Ling. Okay, maybe he can't reinforce. And suddenly TLO's in a bad spot, but it wasn't. And this game's a lot more standard, too. I mean, we're gonna have mass Doom drops, I guess, maybe? But, oh, just 4. Just 4 drops. But still, oops, okay, 6 drops, there you go. But yeah, it's still more of a standard game. We got Ling Baneling Hydra, we're going up to a Greater Spire. MCanning is preparing for that Greater Spire. He's got a 4th base, he's got his own decent work account. Plus 2 upgrades gonna finish here. And he's getting a Fleet Beacon. But TLO is not actually focusing on that production quite yet. So he's still got to deal with this mid-game attack. Big drop into the natural. Phoenix are going to try and help out against this. They do help a little bit. A little tiny bit. A lot of damage will be done on the natural. On the left side, it looks like the majority of MCanning's army was there, so TLO is not going to push into that. And it looks like while the Ling's cleaned up, the Hydras will shortly follow. This is actually not too bad. MCanning had units in both spots, had warp-ins available, and dealt with this pretty smoothly. The TLO always has the backup option of going into a Greater Spire, into Broodlords. He actually starts up 5 mutas. This feels kind of like a trick or even just a gut reaction and realizing, okay, mutas aren't the best idea. Oh no, he's really going to mutas. Okie dokie then. 14 mutas. I guess he had a larva problem, or maybe he was just waiting, I don't know. But 14 mutas, okay, that's an actual tech swap. It's a bit weird to do though in late game PvZ, just because in a lot of PvZs we do have Blink available. Some players are very Blink oriented. Once they get charged, they go right into Blink. And that you do have a decent number of Archons, of which you can spread around. Still, the shock and awe of suddenly mutas appearing usually grabs you a mineral line or 2 worth of probes, and it's just obnoxious to clean up as well. But definitely not common this late in the game, and that's sometimes why it works. But if it doesn't do anything, we'll see why it's usually not done. Already doing something, though. Already getting the Phoenix that are popping out. High Templar going down. 8 probes went down. MCanning, I mean, this is where his left side, the 4th base, could be destroyed. TLO doesn't have anything set up for that, as he is setting up for a Broodlord transition on his side of the map. So, maybe a missed opportunity there from TLO. His mutas are going into the main base now. There is a single cannon here to defend, but no shield battery to overcharge, which means the mutas will get even more probes, a couple more units, and just fly away. So, I mean, that was a decent number of mutas to kill what they did. 14 probes is not a trade, and a great trade for them. But they also got a couple of army units. Perhaps most importantly, they just kept MCanning back at home, not doing anything. His Zealots even got mismicroed, so they were easily cleaned up. And it did still create a bit of an opening for that 4th base. It just wasn't used. TLO is ready to go for phase 3 of his plan here. First it was the drop, then it was the mutas, now it's on to Broodlords. I know he already made... I thought he made more than that. Okay, so he's still making the Broodlords, giving MCanning just a bit more time. MCanning has only recently started his carriers, only recently started +1, which could be under fire. He's gonna go for the Chrono on it. Corruptors head into the main base. Do find a Mama ship. She is pretty alone, and she does not do a lot of damage, so unfortunately that Mama ship might just go down. No Viper yank required. Bit of a surround the Corruptors, so even as an Archon gets a couple of shots off. Oh, the shield battery. Okay, yeah, that's not gonna go down anytime soon. Cheque. Good overcharge on the shield battery, but the Broodlords are here. The rest of the ground army is here. TLO also has some decent upgrades, working on 3 attack for his melee and 2 carapace here. MCanning is going to be stuck a little bit, but he is at least stuck on 4 bases, so it's not actually terrible if he's stuck for now, as long as he's not actively dying. He's getting a couple of Zealots on the left side of the map as well, killing a 6th base, sorry. Might try and head into the 5th base. The Queens are trying to defend that now. TLO checks for MCanning's potential 5th base, doesn't find anything, and gets stopped at the 3rd. But that also is kind of a good sign, right? MCanning doesn't have another base. So once again, going to head into the natural. MCanning's army has shifted around the natural through the 3rd and is now behind TLO's army. Corruptors need to get on top of things. The Overseers also need to get over here to actually give them detection, as a Mothership is the only thing you can see right now. One Overseer might not cut it either, as one is about to die. The other one could be focus fired, but speaking of focus fire, all the Corruptors have died. The Broodlords being awfully lazy to the south side. Only like 2 of them are actually shooting their Broodlings, and suddenly MCanning's army looks significantly better than TLO. TLO caught out of position, awkwardly not microing some of his army, focusing on something else, I guess maybe the attack in the main base, and has lost a pretty expensive late-game army. His Broodlords are going down, his Hydras are going down, and there's still so much left for MCanning that MCanning could actually probably go for a counterattack and do some serious damage. TLO did not accrue that much of a bank before doing that attack, so it's not like he's instantly replacing 50 Hydras and 20 Corruptors. He is slowly rebuilding, slower than MCanning, actually. This little run by is trying to buy some time, but a Link's getting caught in stasis traps. At least take down that Artosis pylon, and it does bring back the army. MCanning perhaps misreading the situation, thinking, I haven't touched TLO's economy in so long, maybe he has a huge bank. Now I'd go for the counter. I would say go for the counter, but a little too hesitant to do so. He is down to 2 carriers and 2 Void Rays, 6 High Templar, but no Archons on the unit tab, so I think he's mostly scared about losing that air army to a remax of Corruptors, and without those Archons, I can actually very much so see his point, but it still feels like a bit of a lost opportunity. MCanning up in supply with this super late-game army just feels like he actually has an opportunity. Not going to even try and take advantage of it. Does it win the game? Maybe not. Does it sometimes throw the games for him? Probably. He is probably having flashbacks to taking a fight like that, immediately countering, and then having 20 Corruptors in his face. And I absolutely get that, but it really sucks because that could have been an opportunity to at least kill one of these bases, collect some of the units on the reinforcements, right, and stop TLO from recovering. But unfortunately did not. MCanning wasn't exactly in the best economic situation at that time either, so even though he kept steady at 150 supply, he didn't really go above and beyond that because his main natural and 3rd base are getting mined out. So that also probably put him in a little bit of doubts. He couldn't reinforce, so if he made a mistake, it'd be bad news for him. So he's playing pretty safe, but now there's a 5th base up. He's starting to collect that supply, get still pretty expensive strong units like Void Rays out here and continuing to upgrade, but TLO now working off all of his 6 bases, even if this one got injured. 7th base on the way in a pretty scary spot. I'm actually surprised he took that one. But also has these upgrades that he's continuing to go for. The Ultra's Cavern feels a little funny. Ultra's generally not very good against Protoss. They either have Immortals or could easily get to Immortal Archon. Or in this case, it's so late in the game that you're talking about air armies more than ground armies, so like, why go for Ultras? So we'll see if he actually uses them. This could just be like a, what-if scenario. Unfortunately, couple units going down. Better trades there for TLO. MCanning having no harassment on this side of the map. Zerg just starting to encompass Eternal Empire in purple goo. He's taking the bottom right base. Could even be so bold as to take the top left. Again, that Artosis pylon against the fully upgraded Lings is looking a little scary, but TLO didn't bring enough Lings to deal with that. Tries to go for a Zealot run by, but gets cleaned up again by very well upgraded Lings. MCanning stopped at +2 attack, never got into armor, never got into shield, so his Zealots are actually getting destroyed by the Lings. Absolutely destroyed by the Lings. And that's actually bad news, not just for run-bys, but quick defensive reinforcements. Usually you reinforce the cannons with Zealots, which is fine enough. But if they're really badly upgraded, they suck. If you're trying to reinforce with Stalkers, that also sucks. And MCanning needs to actually take a second here and produce maybe some Sim City alongside his cannons, so they don't get fully surrounded. Because this is really becoming a problem. Zealots are warped in, but they get destroyed so quickly by the upgrades. Probes going down so quickly as well, because Lings are super cool. Corruptors are not focus firing, but they also can't quite get close enough. A little bit scared to do so. Force fields and storms coming down. Corruptors still not focus firing. Feedbacks go down to the Vipers too. That's the patch in effect. A parasitic bomb hits the mothership, and as such, it's hitting the carriers and the Void Ray. Is it going to be enough? Ultras pop out. Infestors still funneling all the air units, and the Hydras and Corruptor combination, ground and air fighting against MCanning's air. Looks like it might just be enough. This ended up being a very tight fight until TLO's reinforcements kicked in. 3 Ultras, 2 Hydras, cleaning up the last of MCanning's army. That got awkward real quick. And while MCanning still has his 5 Nexus up and running, he has been set back in probes, something considerable. He's actually going up to 50 again, but he's got to transfer them around, I think is currently the problem. Is he isn't actually mining too efficiently. Whereas TLO 65 drone still has a lot of bases to mine from, even though he ended up losing his 9 o'clock, I guess that would be. Ultras also shouldn't really look that great. These Void Rays can even take care of them. They do not have Flux Veins. That is the Anion Pulse Crystals that he got against the Mutas earlier, so Flux Veins could help, maybe. If he's gonna go for Void Rays, I guess why not? But the Ultras in general, alone like they are against Protoss, don't look very good either. So TLO, I mean, despite the Ultras helping against this fight, kind of looking like the Carbot, animation, suddenly just pop out of nowhere, don't actually look that good in these situations. Although 2 Ultras for a Nexus is probably fine for TLO's particular situation. Since his economy is looking better, time is on his side. He's also got a little bit of a run or slither by. What Hydras do, right? They slither into the natural, and so such good upgrades. Like, I mean, obviously as the game goes on and suddenly 20 Lings are surrounding, I'll tap out. GG. As the game goes on and Lings surround your Protoss units as they're warping in, it's usually favorable for the Zerg anyways. But just on top of that, you're talking about really under upgraded units. It's unfortunate. MCanning taps out. Feels probably like it's a hopeless game. But that is unfortunate just because their supplies are still pretty even. But if he was like, I'm never going to get the other side of the map again. I had 2 fights that went well enough for me. I had 1 really good fight. And then 1 fight that was good enough. Yeah, he's going to tap out. I understand it. But that was the most promising game that MCanning had. Massa beat McMunro, is currently facing Vindicta. Silky is up against Namshar. All of the qualifiers, I think, are happening. So you have to find the other casters to see what goes down. They're not being held for us or anything. If he went for the fifth, 6th bases of the natural, does he win that? I mean, maybe. If he could control his army a little bit more than just kind of having everything rush in on him at once. If he had chokes to fall back through, maybe. It did seem like kind of just like a desperate move that did okay, but as the player, probably didn't feel very okay. Whenever you're not killing bases and killing drones, whether you're Zerg, Terran, or Protoss, against another Zerg, you kind of have to default to them just having a bank. Because that's most of your games, actually, I would say. the games that I've played, the games that I've cast, the games I cast being a lot more important, it's usually the case that if there's not much harassment going on, the Zerg does have a 2,000 bank. So for MCanning, he knows his opponent has 6 bases, he knows his army just died, he's kind of desperately rebuilding Void Rays, which is never really a confident position to be in. He probably thinks he's in a worse spot than he was, and maybe he looked at the supply afterwards and was like, oh, okay, I guess I misread that a little bit. He was still definitely correct. Like, the pacing of the game was certainly going in favor of TLO. Anyways, potentially last map here on Ice and Chrome. Bottom left is the red Protoss. He is MCanning. On the top right, we have the blue Zerg TLO. Faltering basically once, I would say, in NA Challenger. He got sent to the lower bracket of the group. The losers match, that's what it's called, by a North American. And his excuse was like, his valid excuse was, I can't figure out how these guys play. It's so weird. But that was like once. Otherwise, he did fine in NA Challenger and usually takes these qualifiers. MCanning has actually historically been capable of getting to qualifier matches, even amongst some of the tougher brackets, the ones that do allow, you know, Scarlet and Special and all them to play, but usually doesn't win them, unfortunately. He's almost gotten into Challenger in previous years a few times, but this, that, or the other things have happened and didn't quite work out, so I know everyone's always cheering for him, and I think that he could, given, like, the correct bracket. I think he actually really could. It's just unexpected for TLO to do what he's doing now and being up to 0, controlling the series. Had one game that looked almost a little bit trolly, but TLO is also just a weird player. So he had one game where he went Mass Ling Baneling, just Ling Baneling. Another game that looked a lot more typical, but he had a pretty bad fight, you know? If I'm giving the TLO a lot of credit here, let's actually take away some credit and say that he had a pretty bad fight around MCanning's natural. If we go back and look at it, I think I could emphasize his Broodlords not attacking a little bit more, because I kind of got a glimpse at the last second. But yeah, his army was all types of misfiring. Either it wasn't firing, or it was too little on one side and too much on the other, you know what I mean? So it was not a pretty fight, and that's the fight that MCanning looked like he could have really taken the momentum with at the very least. Whether or not he could actually carry through and have the killer instinct and all that, that's one of those 9th, 10th, 11th things you start thinking of when you actually become a pro gamer, but he would have had that position, he just didn't really push forward afterwards. So TLO is certainly capable of making potentially game-deciding decisions. He's capable of making game-deciding bad decisions. There we go, that's what I wanted to say. And I think MCanning could maybe take advantage of that, given another similar scenario. It just didn't happen in the last one. All the kids are getting older. It's not really that I'm getting older. I just finally could afford to buy glasses. I've actually probably had the same poor eyesight for the last, like, 8 years, probably. I got my last eye test when I was, like, 25, I think. That'll only be 4 years, actually. But the thing is that yeah, actually, that still makes sense, actually. When I got glasses, it was actually in high school. And then I got my last eye test when I was 25, and they said, your eyes really haven't gotten any worse. So I was like, Gucci, that's a good sign usually. But then last year I took the driver's I had to get my driver's license renewed, so I had to do the eye test. And without my glasses, they were like, okay, you need to be wearing your glasses. And I was like, okay, so maybe my eyesight's actually always been terrible. And I just really underestimated it. To me, it's not that bad that, you know, a street sign is blurry as long as I can tell that it says yield. If I can actually read that it's, you know, Johnson Street, who cares? But not according to the government. So anyways, long story short, I picked out glasses when I was 18 because I just picked it kind of at random. I hated looking at myself, and I didn't like how I looked in glasses. finally could actually get a new pair of glasses, and was like, damn, I look good in these glasses. So I'm wearing these glasses. That's my life story. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk. Okay. Fortunately, not much was happening while I was just blathering about here. So now we have something a little more interesting, which is a spire coming down for TLO. MCanning hasn't had to really worry about this fast of a spire. It's actually a very fast spire. 5 minutes here. Almost like a PvZ spire. So he's really not had to worry about this type of spire. The one in the last game was a little odd. This one is not common, but it's not odd. It just is very, very dangerous to do. Either you're attacked before your mutas are ready or as they're getting ready and you have wasted 200 on a spire, or they actually get to come out and the Protoss player is forced to play very, very defensive. Doesn't mean that they die, especially if they get a scout on it, which he has not scouted. But it does mean that they are pinned back. They're either desperately trying to get the blink and +2 to actually make a push, or they're desperately trying to get the Endian Pulse crystals, which hardly ever happens, it feels like. Last game, again, it was so late. It was just a weird late spire that's why he could get Endian Pulse crystals. But in this type of game, it'd be really difficult to do. You could try, though, and that is one of the ways that you just... It's one of the ways you can defend against mutas. It's also the way that you defend against mutas without being forced into an inevitable base trade. Because Blink Stalkers are usually forced into a base trade. So you saw the Spire. Good Hallucinated Phoenix Scout. Double Hallucinated Phoenix, I believe. Because that's really what you need to ensure you get full scouting. Sees the Spire. Knows mutas are on the way. TLO going to go for some Corruptors as well. Could actually dedicate to Spire Muta Corruptor. Which, if you go for the Corruptors as well, you can actually tackle Endian Pulse Crystal Phoenix. It's still a bit of a dance, for sure, and it has a lot to do with your defense against, like, Ling run-bys and the other ground army and your macro and all that good stuff, but as far as this particular battle, getting Corruptors can help you against the Phoenix. Your mic arm is at the desktop one? I don't know what that means. You need desktop. Like, hatred for MCanning? Did I ever say anything that made me think said I hated him?
Twitch Prime sub received. Thank you for appeasing the overmind.
I'm gonna laugh myself and ran with it. Well, that's a good way to look at life. A couple queens go down to a Warp Prism that's, I'm sure, TLO was not expecting. You know, it's like dropping against mutas as a Terran player. It's actually advisable. It just feels super dangerous to do it. So the Warp Prism is cleaned up. Unfortunately, the queens die, but they sacrifice themselves for the greater good, and TLO doesn't really take that much damage. MCanning, though, hasn't taken that much damage from the mutas, which is also the good news for him. So he's working on his +2. He's got Fleet Beacon on the way, so he is going to be able to go for Endian Pulse Crystals. But unfortunately, by the time he goes for Endian Pulse Crystals, his opponent will have already transferred over into Ling Hydra. Okay, Roach Hydra, actually. Didn't go for Banelings this game. I saw double Lurker Den, and I was like, well, they usually go for Lurkers, you go for Banelings. So he went double Hydras, double Lurkers. He's going to get both upgrades at the same time. Don't see that too often. And MCanning is falling into one of the classic traps of PvZ, which is over-making your defense against the mutas once they've stopped making mutas. It's kind of difficult to tell, but basically, if you don't see more than the mutas they've made, right? If they keep attacking you, it's always the same 8 mutas. That's a bit of a tell. Or if they just stop attacking you, that's also a bit of a tell. If they really go for mutas, you're going to see more of them, and they're going to be constantly attacking you, trying to stop your buildup of Phoenix and Endian's Pulse Crystals, right? If they're not attacking you, they're probably focusing on something else, something less mobile, something like a mass Roach Hydra Lurker army. So MCanning, he needed to identify this before I got Endian Pulse Crystals. I really don't think it's going to help him in this late game. Maybe it does, and maybe it's just one of those things where they both get maxed out and they both have a huge bank and it's like, whatever. But for now, I'd say it does not help. The Phoenixes themselves actually do sometimes help against the Lurkers, though. Gotta keep that in mind. It just isn't usually the most reliable thing. Especially when the Lurkers get both of their upgrades. Thank you, SaySo411 for the Twitch Prime sub. He's getting some damage done, surprisingly. A couple spore crawlers, the mutas there. They still get 7 drones, not bad. Mutas have been delegated to just cleaning up zealot run-bys, which MCanning has 2 set up here. So he's actually heading into the late game pretty swiftly. But TLO, I mean, he's kind of been building up, you know? This has been him powering up a spirit ball, and now he's about to throw it at Frieza, while Frieza cackles at Krillin or whatever she was doing. He was doing. The voice actor in English is definitely a woman, but anyways. Yeah, this is the spirit ball attack. This is going to be lurkers upgraded, both upgrades. They're going to have 2/2 as well, and they're already in the natural, which is probably the worst case scenario for MCanning. His immortal count's not that high. His storms didn't really hit the heart of the lurker army, and they are still sturdy and healthy and upgraded. Cannot emphasize how good these upgrades are. MCanning was also still kind of building up to a late game army, but a lot slower than TLO was building up to his lurker army. He does have a couple of zealot run-bys that are doing some damage, but not really comparable to lurkers, which also now have access into the main base. And once they get into the main base, that's all of MCanning's production down and out. MCanning simply focusing more on surviving than necessarily about what his opponent was really doing. Not uncommon, don't even blame him. It's been a tough series for him, but the lurkers getting into the natural was especially the worst thing that could happen. Sucks not to be able to scout the lurkers and not like meet them head on, but it also is the worst case scenario is really getting them in the production line already. So Immortal is getting bopped just by reinforcing roaches, and the tap out is here. GG, TLO will take the 3-0 over MCanning, and MCanning will have to try again in later qualifiers. But with 12 possible slots,